World History, Chapter 24, Section 5, China and New Imperialism. How did European powers use diplomacy and war to gain power in China? Describe what trade routes Westerners sought in China, the role of internal problems in Chinese reformers and what they were trying to solve and fix, and then how the Qing dynasty eventually fell. So if we look at the trade between Britain and China before the 1800s, China was exporting far more than it was importing. So it was exporting primarily silk and porcelain. And so what Great Britain didn't like is they didn't like the fact that the Chinese were selling Great Britain way more stuff than the Chinese were buying from Great Britain. And so in order to try and overcome this trade deficit, what you see is Great Britain turns to opium, which is a highly addictive drug, and they flood China with this opium, and many of the Chinese people get addicted to opium. And so as a result, then all of a sudden Great Britain has something that the Chinese are demanding. Well, the Chinese government doesn't like it. They get to the point where they arrest and execute Chinese drug dealers. But at the same time, they tell Great Britain, hey, knock it off. Don't bring this stuff into China anymore. And the two nations go to war over it, and Great Britain wins. As a result, what ends up happening is Great Britain and China sign the Treaty of Nanjing, and Great Britain walks out of this treaty in really good shape. First of all, China had to pay Great Britain for all of British losses during the war. They're able to, Great Britain, get Hong Kong, and they held on to Hong Kong for over 100 years, I think. They just recently returned Hong Kong back to China just within the last decade or more. Great Britain gets 5 new ports, and on top of that, they get extraterritoriality rights, which simply means that British citizens are not charged by Chinese laws. They are charged by British laws. So essentially, if someone from Great Britain does something illegal in China, China can't do anything about it. And more than likely, Great Britain isn't going to do anything about it either. So it really gives British citizens free reign throughout China. And what you see is other countries see that China's in a weakened position, and they are going to pretty much come in and negotiate pretty similar deals with China that Great Britain did. And now China is at the mercy of Western European powers. So in response to this, you see a number of reformers who want to begin to try and change China to be able to deal with this. Remember that China is very traditional. They like to stick to their old ways. They're very Confucian. They really don't see other places as having very much value. So especially these scholar officials who are in charge of kind of advising the emperors or whatever, they're very anti-change. And so they are going to resist change at all costs. And this is going to kind of create some tension because you have some people who are saying, listen, we need to modernize, we need to westernize, we need to catch up to the rest of the world so that we're able to protect and keep China safe. And in response, what you see is this self-strengthening movement that begins to take place. The problem is that the scholar officials are telling the emperor not to support this, and because of this lack of government support, it doesn't really get very far. And what ends up happening now is more and more countries are coming in. The United States wants access to China, and so the European powers and the United States agree that they're going to have these spheres of influence. They're going to have these regions of China that they're going to control. The United States really doesn't like that. What they want is they want an open door policy. They want to be able to go into China, all parts of China, and try and outcompete the other European powers to sell American goods in China. And eventually they're able to actually get that open door policy passed. And now it's kind of a free-for-all in China. Again, in response, you have someone who steps up and says, we need to reform. He leads what he calls the 100 Days of Reform. And again, the problem is he's probably lacking some of the key support from the higher-ups that he needs. But a lot of it is that it's just too much, too fast, and China just isn't quite ready for this reform. Eventually, you're going to have a group of Chinese who call themselves the Boxers, and they are going to um, try and drive these Western European powers out. They have all kinds of these secret societies. They have all these really cool nicknames. But in response, all of the powers, including the United States, come together and put down this Boxer rebellion. In the aftermath of the Boxer Rebellion, China realizes it doesn't have any choice but to change, and it does begin to change. It begins to modernize. Sun Yat sen eventually is able to come in and create a republic, and he's hoping that that is going to gain the respect of Western European powers and that China will kind of emerge on the world stage at that point. So if we really kind of, summarize imperialism, it's the analogy of the uninvited house guest, that these people come in without really being asked to come in. They take everything of value. They kind of eat you out of house and home. They criticize your taste in decorating. They don't like the songs that you sing, the art that you look at, the books that you read, the religion that you believe. They really kind of are mocking or looking down upon everything that you kind of value and think is important and that you like. And then when everything is done, they kind of eat you out of house and home and leave you and tell you how lucky you were to have them come visit you and take all of your stuff. That's kind of boiling imperialism down. And so when we look at some of these countries that were under imperialistic rule, they've really kind of struggled to be able to emerge as out of kind of third world status into second and first world status because of this legacy of imperialism.